Hi again, everyone. It's MrMostDaysOff.
And I'm theWizKid.
And we're here today to talk about our sponsor, PopThreads.com, your online destination for all pop culture t-shirts. And right now, for our listeners, you can save 15% when you use the discount code Simpsons at checkout.
Woohoo!
And they don't just have Simpsons shirts, they also have things like old school Nickelodeon, and they've even got us wrestling fans covered.
They also have tons of TV shows like The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, and even movie shirts like Star Wars and Die Hard.
So make sure you head over to PopThreads.com right now.
And use the discount code Simpsons at checkout so you can save a lot of dope!
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as MrMostDaysOff, and we have another awesome episode to talk about and another awesome guest joining us. But first, joining me through thick and thin as usual, it's Richie the WizKid. How are you today, Rich?
I'm hungry for some brains.
I would have shot before I knew you were a zombie.
We'll get there eventually, I think, today. As usual, when we have guests, I won't waste too much time rambling for now. I'll throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the Mannix, but not the Magnum. It is Miles.
Only one, not both, yes. Well, coming back for his second appearance, all the way back in Season 2 for Bart Gets an F and Simpson and Delilah was the last time we heard from this gentleman. But back again to talk about Treehous of Horror 3, it's Mathew Klickstein. Welcome back to the show, Matthew.
Thank you, Mr. Horse. I appreciate it.
Nay of that, please. Nay of that.
Oh, sir, I don't...
So, as we know, Matthew is the author of Slimed, an oral history of the golden age of Nickelodeon, and he's also got a new project, On Your Marc, set to hit theaters in October of 2017, and he's back again, of course, to talk not only about The Simpsons, but a little bit about that project. So what's going on with On Your Marc there, Matt?
Well, fans of, I would imagine, Simpsons, especially early Simpsons, I'm sure are familiar with Mr. Marc Summers, a TV icon, host of Double Dare on Nickelodeon, and also What Would You Do? He also was a host of Unwrapped on Food Network and produced a lot of material for both Food Network and Nickelodeon. Shows up a lot even these days on things like The View and The Today Show and that kind of thing, Guys, Grocery, and Games on Food Network. And we basically have put together a full feature-length documentary about Marc's life, focusing a great deal on a one-man theater show about his life based on his book dealing with his struggles with OCD over the years and some of the other challenges that he faced and ultimately overcame. So what's great about the film is it's not just kind of a meandering, circuitous sort of adventure through the life of Marc Summers, not really going anywhere. We actually are following the development of his show, the difficulties he has putting it together and rehearsing, some tension coming from, is it going to come together in time? Because it's opening at a point. We kind of have a clock ticking, so to speak. And meanwhile, we're learning about his life. We're meeting his mom. We're meeting his first grade teacher, the person who taught him magic, and a few special guests, including Neil Patrick Harris, Ryan Seacrest, who kind of looks up to Marc as a mentor, Seth Green, through Marc's been on Robot Chicken a whole bunch of times, Guy Fieri, of course, from Food Network, and a few other fun folks. So it's a great film. I'm really proud of it. We have a small team that's been working with me over the last 2 years or so. Josh Yan, Eric Cups, John Nickham, Chloe Sullivan, and a number of other people that have kind of come and gone and helped us out over the last 2 years. But those are kind of the central folks. And of course, Marc himself, who's not just the subject, but also the executive producer and has really helped us put all this together. So we will be partnering up with Alamo Drafthouse, those great theater
awesome.
spaces. Yeah, we're really excited.
Movie and a beer. What else do you need in life, really?
Exactly. I'm going to say it right now. I think this is the first time that we've publicly announced that we are going to be partnering with Alamo. Marc's going to be doing some press on that very soon as well with some pretty big outlets. We'll have some more information about that at marcsummersmovie.com, MARC Summers, plural, movie.com, and we are locking down those dates and locations. We're going to basically do a bunch of screenings and live events with Mark and some of the rest of the gang at a few different locations at different Alamos and other theaters throughout October and November, most likely, because that's the anniversary of Double Dare. So very exciting
Very
stuff.
cool.
Yeah, I honestly, I think it's a great movie. It's got a lot of heart. It's got some conflict, and I think even someone who might not necessarily know who Mark is, or who might not be a fan of his, or might not even care about this kind of thing, I think they'll still enjoy it just to see how a theater show comes together in 2016, 2017, and what that all takes, and kind of the hardships that go on, all the behind the scenes shenanigans and that kind of thing that happen, especially for someone Mark's never really done a theater show before. So, I think this is something that anyone could really enjoy, whether they're aware of Mark or not. So, really excited about that.
To your point on that, I personally love documentaries just in general, and a lot of times the surprise hits, the ones that that get me by surprise, are the ones that I don't really have a very deep knowledge of. It's like, I feel like, I get like an education out of these 1.5 to 2 hour process, essentially. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of documentaries about things that I'm very fond of that I enjoy, but like I said, sometimes you just pick a random one, and that really helps. So to your point, for anybody that knows, and anyone who knows Marc Summers probably loves Marc Summers and can't wait. But if you don't know Marc Summers, just see the movie, because I'm sure it's going to be really interesting to get a portrait of a man who's had a very unique career and a very unique life.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. We're really excited. Just the last thing I'll say is, we're all fans of Mark. We all grew up on his shows and whatnot, but every person involved, myself included, everyone's professional filmmakers or have worked in TV and such. We've really put together quite a great team. And so it looks good. It sounds good. We got a great musician who did the music for us. And so, one of the things that keeps coming up, some of the people have seen some of the early cuts, is my favorite response is, wow, it really looks like a movie. And it's like, yeah, just because it's Mark.
That's what they say about this podcast. They're like, wow, this almost sounds like a podcast. And we're like, thanks, man. That's really cool of you to say.
The last thing I'll say about it is, and Mark knows this too, his fan base, is a bit older now. We're all in our 30s, some people in their 40s. Obviously has younger fans as well who are just learning who he is now, or going back through, older things like Double Dare and Unwrapped and whatnot. But I think the core fan base, the critical mass, is really people in their 30s. And a lot of us, have grown up to work in film and work in TV, or, you guys are doing your podcasts and other people doing that kind of thing. And we were aware of that when we were putting this together. So I think one of the things that might surprise people is it's a fun movie. There's obviously some goofiness. Of course, there's a few pie fights along the way. But still, I think it's the kind of film that you could see on like an HBO or a Showtime. And I think that's one of the things that is really going to surprise people, is that there's a certain austerity to it. I'll even go so far as to say sophistication that we really were trying to keep to. The aesthetic we were always playing with is tuxedos with sneakers. And, that's nice. How we really put the entire film together. So I think the thing that'll really impress people is this is not just, some kind of wonky YouTube video, or, just a fanboy type of video. Like, no, it's a real film. It's one of the reasons Alamo has decided to work with us. We're probably also going to be partnering with a few other theater entities and the like in different places around the country that have started asking to do screenings. I think just about anybody could watch this film and really get a lot out of it. So we're very proud of how it came together.
Dude, that Alamo partnership is a big deal. The Alamo Draft House in Texas, at least, that started in Austin, not too far from us, and it's blown up big time recently in the last few years, I mean. But I remember going to the first Alamo Draft House down in Austin, visiting family, and just, getting in with a company like that. I think that's a really cool move for your movie, man. Yeah,
we're very excited. They've been great. Everyone we've talked to has worked with them in the past. Made it clear that they're a fantastic company. And, we knew that they would be the right home for this because they just recently did that Raiders of the Lost Ark documentary. But they've also made some documentaries that have gotten nominated for Academy Awards. And every time we've seen interviews with them and that kind of thing, they seem like us. They seem like a bunch of, 20, 30, 40-year-old, film geeks and the like. And we just knew, oh, they're going to love Marc Summers. They're going to want this. And I mean, it was an easy process. It was, we have a great product. We're working with Mark. We promised that we can bring Mark and some of the gang along with, and they were basically like, where do we sign up? We'd love to do this. So we can't wait. And I have to say that the Austin one in particular, if you guys do have a chance to come out, or anybody else, because we'll be doing a few different ones, but the Austin one's going to be the flagship one. And from what it sounds like, we're basically going to be taking over the town for the day and just doing a whole bunch of different things, pub trivias with Mark, and going up and down 6th Street, pieing people in the face, and laser smoke over.
I am definitely. You let me know when that's going to happen, and I will clear my calendar.
Yeah, it's going to be a very fun day, maybe too. I mean, it's going to be a full on event. They're going to be live streaming it and the whole works. So we're very, very excited about how this is all coming together. So if you go to the Austin one. That's going to be the big one for sure.
Oh, I will be there. You let me know. That's absolutely going to happen. That sounds amazing.
Fantastic.
So everything's going well with On Your Marc. Is there anything else going on in your world you want to share with us before we dive into this episode of The Simpsons?
Yes, 2 quick things. One is that I can't talk about it too much, but I am going to be doing my next book project with HarperCollins. It does revolve around The Simpsons, and I'm very excited to be working on that with a number of different people that I'm talking to from The Simpsons world and otherwise, and we can't wait for that. It should likely come out in fall 2018. We're still in the earlier stages of that, but all I'll say is that Simpsons fans are going to be very delighted. I think comedy fans in general will be delighted as well. And, there'll be obviously more information coming out about that probably within the next 6 months or so. But
so that sounds like foreshadowing for your next appearance on our show.
Oh, yeah. I definitely will come back for that. And so, I have that going on. And then, the little thing of, I guess I'm getting married on Friday. So that as well.
What? Congratulations, sir. That's awesome.
Yeah. So another thing to check off the list there.
Very cool. And a hell of a tax break.
Save the best for last.
Yeah, that's a big announcement. Congratulations to you and the soon to be missus.
Yes, sir. She's taking a nap right behind me right now as we speak.
Very cool. So let's dive into Treehouse of Horror 3. This episode debuted on October 29th, 1992. And this year, instead of Marge coming out to warn everyone of how scary this episode, it's actually Homer in a very Alfred Hitchcockian way. He enters the screen with a silhouette on the screen in the same way that they did during the show Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
Homer is probably the worst choice to come out and try to calm our nerves before a show.
Well, I love how he basically addresses everybody as crybabies, or says that the only ones who probably are crybabies are most likely the religious types.
There are some crybabies out there, religious types mostly.
Well, it's funny because I know they talk about this in the commentary as well, but the joke is supposed to be that he's too fat for the outline, so that he's fatter than Alfred Hitchcock, if you notice. But, whenever I've heard that, both in the commentary and just otherwise, you can't really see it. But I guess that's
it's very subtle. I heard the same thing, and it's very, very subtle. It's hard to see because these yellow lines just barely exceed the white lines.
Yeah. But that was I think we talked about this last time, if I remember correctly, but that was back when the show was still a little verboten and was something that was seen as devilish, or was being castigated by politicians and the like for corrupting the youth and for being satanic and whatnot. Nowadays they have books about how you can use The Simpsons, in your church classes, and some of the gang from The Simpsons have been, blessed by the Pope and all these kinds of things. But I think back then it was, that was still, for them to be kind of mocking religious people was still actually provocative.
Oh yeah, sure. They were poking the bear, so to speak, at that time still, and it still actually meant something to do so.
Yeah, although society in general has changed a lot. Now that's a pastime for anybody. And, I myself am, secular and Jewish anyway, but, I think just in general, it's so easy to do that now. But back then it was actually saying something, especially to have a primetime family show for, that was a cartoon doing that. So, yet again, another thing that they really pioneered and really pushing the edge when there was still an edge to be pushed. So.
And on top of that, we're about to see Bart dressed as Clockwork Orange. So, that could be pushing other buttons as well.
Dude, that's actually a pretty heavy costume for a fourth grader. If you really that movie is fucked up. Like, I watched a lot of movies, horror movies, when I was younger. I I still to this day love the horror genre, and I arguably started watching it from too young of an age. Possibly my parents were a bit too liberal when it came to their beliefs on me watching movies in hindsight. However, even myself, I don't think I would have saw Clockwork Orange until I was a little bit older than Bart, and I definitely don't think I would have been allowed to dress up as one of the characters from it, considering the beatdown and the implied raping and all of the terrible things that character does.
Yeah, do you guys remember if you had seen Clockwork Orange yet by the time this episode aired?
No,
I had not. I was 7 at the time that this aired.
You guys would have not been Bart's age yet, even.
Not quite.
This is
we
probably
weren't even Lisa's. I was still shy of Lisa.
This is about the time I started watching The Simpsons like live every week. Was around this episode.
You were finally able to stay up that late, huh?
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to stay up that late, but I had a TV in my room, I think, or I had access to one in the other room, something of that nature, because I remember I would often be, like, lying down on the floor watching The Simpsons and then, like, crawling back into my bed to try to, not get caught. It worked about half the time. I don't think my parents really cared as long as I was being quiet.
I remember The Simpsons for me around this time was the barrier before bed. It was like, all right, Simpsons and then bed. So that was always the last thing I'd watch before I'd brush my teeth and get into bed and maybe I'd read for a little bit or whatever it might be, and then I'd go to sleep. But yeah, I think I saw Clockwork Orange because I would have been 10 or 11. And I saw Clockwork Orange when I was like 12 or 13. So this was right before I saw Clockwork Orange. I did see it at a young age. I remember watching Clockwork Orange and Escape from New York back to back. I'd rented them.
Nice.
Yeah, I watched them with a friend of mine who, when we were done with it, he goes, now you have to watch 2001 Space Odyssey.
Jeez.
So, yeah,
that's a marathon right there, dude.
I think the first few times I saw this episode, I thought Bart was dressed as like Charlie Chaplin or something like that until I had context.
Yeah, I didn't get the reference for sure when I first saw this. I probably wouldn't have got the reference until at least when I was in middle school or high school.
I always associate this episode with, I was at a friend of mine named David, who I haven't seen probably since I was 12. It was his birthday party. It's one of those slumber parties at his house, and we'd been watching it. And so I remember that party, and it wasn't a party, it was just us all sleeping over and hanging out. But I remember that, and I remember the other big thing was we were playing one of those kind of really early WWF
nice
Nintendo games when it was just like sort of the little like deep 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 deep. So for some reason in my mind it's that party and those like that really early wrestling game. I don't even remember which one it is.
Those games on the NES particularly, those games are awful. Now moving into like the Sega generation, They had some awesome wrestling games. I remember we used to stay up late into the night, and
Shawn Michaels
at
with
the
a
time
kick.
It was a big deal. Right. It was a big deal because you could do things like knock out the ref,
right.
And I remember we would be fascinated with this concept of the whole idea would be just so we could we'd work together even though we were fighting each other, just so we could knock the fucking ref out so one of us could try to hit the other with a chair, and by the time we got the clumsy mechanic to actually work, the ref would have woken up and we get disqualified anyway. So it was a lot to do for nothing, but man, good time staying up all hours of the night on the old WWF games.
Yeah, no, so it was that and this episode for sure. So
that's a good pairing, man. I recommend that for anybody listening to this show tonight. Pop in The Simpsons, get you some old school era WWF games, and you just have yourself a fucking good time.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that was good, and all the stuff with Grandpa in this episode, I really enjoyed as well.
He's the MVP for sure. Some of his. That's not true, and you know it. It's one of my favorite lines in this entire episode.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that they did not do the traditional opening. They did the usual Halloween where they go through the gravestones, and they did have the spooky names for now the second year in a row. Some of the graves themselves included things like Drexel's class, which was actually something that they had decided to stop doing after this episode. Drexel's class was a Fox show that got canceled, but they stopped doing that. I'm sure, Matthew, you heard this as well. Because ends up when they would put other shows, sometimes their friends worked on those shows and it wasn't taken so well.
I actually had heard that the reason they did that was that the show was already going, and I think either it was going to be gone and they knew it, or it was like right around that time. And what I had heard was that they did it sort of as a tribute to Drexel's class. But I could be mistaken, but I thought that's what it was. Like, they were kind of doing it to sort of almost memorialize Drexel's class. And indeed, you know, it's one of the things people remember, because I think this is one of the, in my opinion, one of the more memorable Halloween of Horror, Treehouse of Horror episodes.
Don't you mean Treehous of Horror?
Treehous, yeah, exactly. So forevermore, we'll remember Drexel's class, along with, of course, much later on in the episode, all the animal cartoons that never worked out, like Fish Police and Animal Critters or whatever. But yeah, you guys ever? Here's the question. I was actually wondering this. I was looking forward to asking the question. Did you guys ever actually watch Drexel's Class? Do you remember that show?
Nope, I never.
Not
saw
even
it.
A little bit.
Oh, Drexel's Class was great. I actually watched Drexel's Class. It was good. Yeah, Dabney Coleman. That was back when you guys again might be a little too young to remember, but there was just this spate of shows that were either about like man children, like Chris Elliott on Get a Life, or they were basically these kind of I don't want to say grizzled, but sort of lovingly curmudgeonly older gentlemen who were either teachers or fathers.
Like a Mr. Feeney
Exactly.
type?
There was just this spate of, yeah, exactly. So that's a little bit more. Imagine there was just for a while, there was like 5 or 10 shows that all kind of featured a Mr. Feeney type character, but as the lead rather than as sort of the sidekick or the kind of
the supporting cast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and Drexel's Class was one of them. He was one of those teachers who was kind of one of those characters who he was an authority figure. And he was kind of mean, but kind of not. Again, endearing and lovable in the end. He just, he had kind of a very low tolerance. He was much like Tennessee Williams in that he did not suffer fools gladly. But as long as you were not a fool, he was your friend and would, teach you about life.
I read just a very brief synopsis, so maybe I either misread or misunderstood what I was reading, but if I saw this correctly, wasn't the concept of this show is Drexel basically got assigned to go teach school because he got caught with tax evasion? So to get out of it, he actually agreed to go teach at a high school or something? Was that loosely what that show is about? I don't remember
that origin story at all. I just remember the actual episodes, and so I might have maybe missed the first one or just completely don't remember that's what happened. But it definitely kind of had like a Welcome Back Kotter feel to it, where it was sort of the unconventional teacher feel. Like you kind of if it had been made into a movie today, he would be coming to class drunk. It would have kind of a Bad Santa or School of Rock kind of sensibility to it. But what you're talking about, it's very likely, and it probably is. I mean, if that's what it says out there. But I just remember kind of the sole conceit was that he was kind of the teacher without really being the best person to teach the class. It was sort of
I just immediately got this vibe of Mighty Ducks, where I just guessed the 90s was a special time where if you committed tax fraud or any sort of minor crime like that, your punishment was to either teach or coach youth at whatever activity you happen to be good at, because that's the whole premise setup of the Mighty Ducks is he was a lawyer who got caught basically being a sneaky as fuck lawyer, so he's like, oh, okay, well, your punishment is go coach a hockey team. And when I read that synopsis, I was just like, is this like the Mighty Ducks, but for grade school teachers?
Yeah, I never noticed that before, but you're really right. There was also definitely a real trend of movies of you have committed a crime and thus you're going to have to teach these kids. And it's like, wait a second.
I've got to teach these kids.
How do I reach these kids?
That's a terrible idea.
See, when
it makes no sense, but I love the 90s. Who cares? It's
when you
awesome.
first started talking about it, I was thinking of Community, honestly, before you even brought up the Mighty Ducks. So, lawyer fraud and go back to college. Sorry, that's not from the 90s.
By the way, Skeletons. Skeletons was the couch gag, by the way. Don't know how we got here. We went through a strange segue there, but it's all good. The Simpsons opened with the Simpsons family running to the couch as skeletons, and then we are at the Halloween party at the Simpsons home. There's a pretty good turnout. They're doing your typical Halloween party stuff. Did you guys ever do the monster game where they're passing around the various body parts, like the spaghetti for the guts and the grapes for the eyeballs, stuff of that nature?
No, but I actually always enjoyed that thought because of this episode. I thought it was a nifty little trick from Marge.
I never did that, but I did really, really enjoy Halloween growing up. Every year, starting around June or July, I would start saving up my money. I'd do little odd jobs in the neighborhood over the summer or save what little allowance I would get and whatnot, because I knew I just wanted to get like the best Halloween masks and the best makeup and all different kinds of things. I would pre-order stuff from the store. This was pre-Amazon and all that. So I took Halloween very seriously, and we would often have big parties at my house, all different kinds of people. And one year we did make Halloween food, and I remember we used, I guess, potato like spuds or something, like instant potato on chicken wings, and we made what seemed like they were supposed to be bat wings. So they were chicken, but they had it seemed like they had scales on them. So those were bat wings, and then we made worms out of Jell-O, of course, and a number of other things like that. I just particularly remember the bat wings because I just thought that was a clever idea. It was in 1001 Things to Do for Halloween, or one of those books you got at like the book fair from the Scholastic things or whatever it was. But yeah,
totally.
So I did. That was my one food-based Halloween memory that I have. But I loved Halloween. I mean, that was one of the reasons I always really enjoyed the Halloween specials of The Simpsons. In fact, as I got older and didn't really keep up with the show as much, probably up until very recently, I still would at least watch the Halloween episode of The Simpsons every year, not just because I usually enjoyed it and I wanted to have still some connection to The Simpsons, but that was part of my Halloween tradition, even though, as they joke more and more on the show, half the time now it's on in like late November or whatever it is.
I couldn't be more the same. I still to this day love Halloween. It's absolutely, without even a close contender, my favorite holiday, and I still go all out for Halloween. Such a good time. I did actually do this game one time, I wanted to say, and it was a lot of fun. Something I would definitely recommend because it's super cheap and super easy to just kind of be silly and have a good time, especially with kids. I mean, obviously, it's only going to go so far with adults, but with kids, it's a great activity for Halloween. Since you bring it up, and I know we're all big TV guys, and this is a Halloween episode in June, but oh well. Like I said, love Halloween. I specifically love Halloween specials. The Simpsons is probably my favorite Halloween special in general in terms of TV shows that have Halloween specials, but I wanted to ask you guys, as fellow TV junkies, what are some of your favorite sitcoms that do a annual Halloween special?
Well, I think there's one very, very obvious one that I'm hoping you guys are thinking too, because there's the Simpsons Halloween episode, and then in my book, a very close second was the Roseanne Halloween.
I was thinking the exact same thing for number 2.
Yeah, what else was there? I mean, that was
Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin.
Yeah, I get. Well, but Charlie Brown was different because it wasn't like a series. Though.
Yeah, so, but I watched.
I mean sitcom specifically.
Yeah,
I did mean sitcom specifically. And for its worth, my third place is Home Improvement. I think that it had the spirit of Roseanne, special. But Roseanne did it so much better. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean they would. And the fun thing about Roseanne, as you might remember, is they had a running gag every year where you were waiting to see who got pranked, and they were always pranking each other, and that was always something you were waiting for, which I thought was really clever, because whereas with The Simpsons, it was all about the parodies and that they were able to go as wild with it as they wanted to. On Roseanne, it wasn't just that it was Halloween, it was also kind of figuring out who was going to get pranked, what is the prank, is something really crazy going on, but that is the prank. I mean, I thought that was really great. So
super great. I couldn't agree more. That like who's getting who aspect of that show is fantastic. I loved it. I have done no research on this, so it could easily just be an internet hoax or just a fan-made rumor, but I have heard both Friends and Roseanne are actually getting a reboot treatment. It's actually the original cast is going to come together for one more season. So theoretically, Matthew, we could get one more Roseanne Halloween special. It's a possibility that has now been played with. that, if everything you read on the internet is true, then both John Goodman and Roseanne have agreed to come back for sure.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, the whole cast, and in fact, both Beckys are coming back. That is true.
Oh, there you go. Awesome.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, one of the things that, of course, has been the big uproar, obviously, is not just both Beckys are coming back. I think the second one is going to be playing somebody else, but she'll still be there. But, of course, the big question is, even without, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the actual series, even if we're to assume that Roseanne, the whole last season was all a dream in Roseanne's head that she was writing about, Dan's still, Dan's dead. He's either gone or he's dead. So
to
bring him back is very interesting. So we'll see how that works. I don't know.
Do the whole Dallas thing, but like in a weird, twisty sitcom way, I guess. I don't know.
Roseanne does what Roseanne wants. So I would.
You damn right.
She almost makes fun of it and almost looks at the camera and goes, "We wanted John Goodman back. Go screw yourself."
I would be totally for that. Honestly, I would. Who didn't love Deadpool, and that's what he would have done.
Right.
WWDD, right?
Yeah.
So this is a Treehouse of Horror episode we're talking about. So of course this game does not last long. The handing food out, because it turns out Homer is eating the food as it comes around, and it's not getting to about half the party. I love the line when Marge calls Homer out for eating it, and he's like, "It was an evil game."
Yeah.
Lisa decides she'll tell a scary story, which is a usual trope of the tree horse of how. God damn it! I can't even say it fucked up when I want to. And her story starts out with "Clown Without Pity." This was supposed to be a spoof on a movie title. I didn't catch what it was. Did you, Matthew?
It's actually a song title, "Town Without Pity." I'm trying to remember right now as we speak, and like a good non-millennial. I don't want to Google it, but I know the song from somewhere. I just can't remember from where. I'm not going to Google it. It's going to come up. It'll probably just randomly sputter out of my mouth later on in the episode. I know it from somewhere, but it's a song called "Town Without Pity."
It's okay if you forget that. Just don't forget your safe word, Matthew. That's my advice as you going into getting married this Friday. That's an important thing to know.
Absolutely.
We open up on this story. It's Bart's birthday. He actually gets his first and best present from his grandfather. It's a giant box full of cash. When asked where he got the money, Abe says, "I didn't earn it. I don't need it. But if the government misses one payment, I'm going to raise hell about it." Bart couldn't be happier, but when he asks Homer where his present is, Homer admits he didn't buy one. I think he was trying to cover it up and he kind of forgot, because he's like, "I didn't get one."
Or he just didn't try this time. In the past, he's like, "It's in the other room. I'll be right back." And then you hear the footsteps hurriedly out the door in the car going. But this time you got him to admit the truth. Wally did all that stuff.
Dark joke, he swears on his father's grave while his father's standing in the room that he will get that birthday present, or he'll go out and buy that birthday present still.
Yeah, Grandpa has some great responses and some great kind of straight man moments throughout the episode. I really love that line, because after Homer says it, Grandpa goes, "Hey!" But in a way that is just perfect. So I love everything that comes out of Grandpa throughout the entire episode, for sure.
I'd be scared if I was in this situation.
Yeah, but yeah.
Fortunately for Homer, Springfield's House of Evil, the one-stop evil shop, is open and ready to sell Homer an evil Krusty the Clown doll.
Is this before they transfer over to the Rick and Morty series and the devil works there?
Yeah, it's that's like the Stephen King novel, isn't it? Where the devil sells you. Well, I can't remember what that book is called, but he sells you whatever you need.
You're thinking of
Needful Things. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
I got more of a Gremlin spoof on this one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's definitely. I think even Al Jean says in the comment. I mean, you can tell that it's supposed to be Gremlins, but Al Jean says that it was a Gremlins moment for sure. I mean, that's who that guy is. Clearly,
weird that they put a Christmas movie reference into a Halloween show, but I get it. It's cool.
Did you see the monkey paw was on the counter inside there?
Oh, I've seen. Now I know what you're talking about. I've seen that meme because they show that the monkey paw from the last Halloween of Horror is in there, and then since you brought it up a moment ago, recently there's been a meme going around where the monkey paw episode of Rick and Morty, they say looks like it's drawn in a similar style that may be intentionally a reference to The Simpsons.
It wouldn't surprise me. Sorry, there's a train behind me and it's going to be on the recording. However, I wanted to point out that the last monkey paw episode was also Lisa's story. So I thought that was a pretty cool comparison.
Oh, I didn't catch that part. That's very interesting.
Hey, dun dun dun.
Well, this House of Horror shop is also a Frogurt shop, but it's evil Frogurt. But you get nuts, so that's good. But those nuts are bad. They do this whole, like, Abbott and Costello routine where it's just basically, well, and that's good, and that's bad, and then that's good, and that's bad. And finally it ends with the nuts that you get are bad because...
The toppings contain potassium benzoates. And Homer just blankly stares at him. And he goes, that's bad.
Well, they talk about it in the commentary, but I've heard and read this elsewhere. I'm sure you guys know that, that's always a sure sign when they have a running joke like that it's also just they're running short on time in the episode.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they've talked.
Same with the couch gags. If you get like a really long couch gag, it's killing time for sure.
Right.
Miles pulling up stuff we learned from Michael Price.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. And Mike Price, I don't know, did Mike Price talk about Teen Angel also?
A little bit, yeah.
Just briefly, he brought it up, yes.
Teen Angel? That's funny.
He did. And probably better than that, he talked about Homeboys in Outer Space,
gosh.
which has got to be one of the greatest show titles you've ever heard,
you mean
right?
the show that Spike Lee called a hate crime?
It's actually very interesting. For our listeners that already know this, if you, I'll send you a link when the show drops next week. Spoiler alert, these don't air live, but Michael Price actually met Mike Reese and Al Jean through a connection at Homeboys in Outer Space. True story.
Yeah, no, there was actually a big group of people who worked for Homeboys as bad of a show. I remember that it was on. I don't know if I ever watched an episode of it, but there were a lot of people who worked on it. And so I don't know if Michael Price talked about this, but even at Teen Angel, Larry Wilmore worked on that show. And so, even when these Simpsons writers would be working at shows that were quote unquote less than, they still would end up being in a good writer's room. I guess just whatever writer's room you were in back then. I'm sure you guys know we've talked about this before, but people are always surprised on Clarissa Explains It All on Nickelodeon. They had a number of people who wrote for the show who would go on to do stuff, like Friends, which, not the best written show in the world, but definitely went on to be very popular.
I love Friends. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
The big one with Clarissa, and some of the other writers went on to do some pretty big things too, but the big one with Clarissa was Suzanne Collins, who would go on to do the Hunger Games books.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the first things she worked on. In fact, I've remained friendly with Jason Zimbler, who played Ferguson. And yeah, he tells this great story that I love that he never put that together, and his younger sister was a big Hunger Games fan, and so he knew about it through that. And one day he was just going through some of his old scripts that his parents kept when he was visiting them. They kept all the scripts, and he saw a few of them were written by Suzanne Collins, and he kind of did a double take, he told me, and didn't really put it together. Then he realized he remembered there being a writer named Suzanne, but of course he didn't necessarily remember her last name.
Yeah, because you don't call people Suzanne Collins. You're just like, hi, Suzanne, how are you? Yeah.
So, you never know. And, Clarissa was obviously a pretty good show and a lot of fun, but it's always really fascinating to learn even a show that is, might seem a little bit goofier for kids or whatever it might be, or Homeboys from Outer Space, for example, or Teen Angel, some of these other lesser shows, possibly, depending on what you might think, that still have these writers who go on to do, these award-winning shows or these very popular shows or books or whatever. So you never know.
Well, I like to think to each their own, and somewhere out there in the world, there is like a diehard Homeboys in Outer Space fan that just is like, it was the greatest show ever. I don't know why it was canceled. Yeah. That's the world I like to live in.
Yeah, I hope so. There was a show called, I was just reading about again, called Meego, Meego, with Bronson Pinchot from Perfect Strangers, Ed Begley Jr., Michelle Trachtenberg, and Jonathan Lipnicki, the little kid from Jerry Maguire. And another person, William Estes or something, is his name. He was on, I can't remember what shows, I think even now, but it lasted for 6 episodes before they pulled it. But Bronson Pinchot was an alien, a shape-shifting alien, and it just seems like the dumbest possible show. But it came out the same time as Teen Angel, actually, and they made fun of when the critiques came out. They made fun of both Mego and Teen Angel. That's how I know about what Mego is.
Oh wow. What a connection.
They basically were like, Mego, they said Mego is the worst show that ever came out, but it makes Teen Angel look like something like, something really good or whatever. I don't remember what it was, but they basically first said Mego was the worst show ever, then Teen Angel's even worse. So
that is a hell of a scathing review.
But at least Teen Angel lasted like, I think 20 episodes or something like that. Mego only lasted for 6. So.
Well, and kind of to your earlier point, too, it's amazing that all these guys just kind of landed through these projects that, did not take off to be kind to them. They just didn't take off, we'll say, and they all ended up finding their way to The Simpsons through various means. It's a fascinating journey that they have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, especially over the years, I mean, some of the seasons, as I'm sure you know, like especially the Mike Scully years, they had like 25 writers at a time or whatever it is. So, it's people definitely come and go. I think over the years they've had something like 100 or 150 different writers, and some of them grow up to become Conan O'Brien or create their own shows, and a lot of them just end up staying at The Simpsons, as we know. Some of them kind of fade away or move on to other things. So. Definitely a lot of them have come and gone over the years. That's for sure.
It's crazy, man. Crazy. And a lot of them worked on this episode, which we will talk about. That we'll get through it. Who cares? This could be a 3-parter. I don't care. There's 3 segments. We'll get through it eventually. I like that they buy the talking Krusty doll right off the shelf, but then when Homer brings it home, it's actually in a box as if it's like brand new. I was wondering if they just kept the box for some reason and why it wouldn't have been in box. As a toy collector, that's something that would drive me insane because I've got a lot of action figures, but I'll be damned if they're coming out of the box. So just the idea of them putting a used toy in a new box really stuck out to me.
It was probably the actual box that it came with, and he was just putting it there so you could pick it up and play with it, and it could kill people. But I mean, when you give it to Bart, Bart's going to take it right out of the box immediately.
I wonder if while getting it out of the box to put it on display is when the switch was accidentally.
That's a really good call. That answers both those questions as far as the
continuity
box, and the why got switched. Now here of course is the big question: have either one of you actually seen the Talking Tina episode?
No, I have not. I have not seen that before.
I have seen that. I've seen actually every episode of The Twilight Zone. I'm a huge fan of that show. And I've also seen the Trilogy of Terror, which was the other big influence for this setup. It was kind of a hybrid of those 2 movies. The first part of the Trilogy of Terror, specifically, where the little doll is trying to kill the woman whose name slips my mind.
Well, all I'll say is, to this day, I mean, I think that Twilight Zone is the best television show that's ever been on. Close second is the Larry Sanders Show. I like yourself, Miles. I've seen all 156 episodes. I've watched them ever since I was a kid. It was a big thing that I did with my mom when we would over Thanksgiving and New Year's. I mean, to me, Thanksgiving and New Year's meant Twilight Zone marathons, and wherever we were.
Do you remember on New Year's Eve when Twilight Zone would play for 48 hours straight on the Sci-Fi Channel? That was my absolute favorite.
Even before it was on Sci-Fi, it was on. There was it was actually on, I think, a network. They did the marathon. I think on NBC or whatever it was, or CBS, probably, because I think that's what it originally aired on. But no, Thanksgiving and New Year's for my mom and I meant Twilight Zone. And even if we were at a family member's house or a friend's house and they were all watching sports or whatever, we would watch Twilight Zone. But I was going to say, to this day, there is one episode that scared me then, scared me later on, and scares me to this day. And I mean, there's something about that episode that is just, there's a certain quiet atmosphere to it. And that last shot at the end, I don't know if you remember, but it's sort of in a strange kind of almost surreal, dreamlike slow motion when the doll says, "You better be nice to me." And it just, they did things in that episode they simply did not do in other episodes of Twilight Zone.
It pushed the boundaries in terms of the scare factor on that show. Is definitely one of the scarier episodes.
Without a doubt. And yeah, so yeah, I love that episode.
More often than not, that show really just kind of left you in a position where you just had like a profound thought at the end of the episode, where it like flipped our reality on its end. But that episode's goal was to scare the piss out of people, and they got pretty close. I'm sure on a couple of occasions.
And to bring it back to cartoons, the voice, if I remember correctly, was the great June Foray, who did who was like basically the female version of Mel Blanc. Like anything that he didn't do that was a female, she did.
Oh, cool.
I think she only just died recently. She was still working well into her 90s. In fact, I think one of the big voice actor awards, if not the biggest, is like the June Foray Award. But she did Rocky the Squirrel from Rocky and Bullwinkle. She did both Grandma and I think Tweety Bird. She did the Broomhilda Looney Tunes. I mean, she's done so many, and if I remember correctly, that's her voice. To actually bring it back again to The Simpsons, I'm friends with Maggie Roswell, who, for some of you who might not know, listen to your show, voices Maude Flanders and Milhouse's mom and Reverend Lovejoy's wife and Lisa's teacher, Miss Hoover, amongst others, Sherry Bobbins. Mm-hmm. And she told me a really funny story of going to, she was nominated for the June Foray Award, went out there to the award ceremony and everything, and she was very disappointed because she lost the June Foray Award to June Foray.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I mean, if you gotta lose, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to your Nerds podcast episode where you had her on your podcast. That was a great listen. Yeah. You've had a couple of really cool guests on that.
Yes,
plug your podcast real quick, man.
Plug
while we're talking about
if anyone's still listening to this episode, I have a very, very erratically kept podcast of my own called Nerds, Nertz. It's nertspodcast.com. And one of the episodes, we deal with nerd and geek culture. We talk to different filmmakers and actors and writers and all different kinds of people. We've actually had some pretty cool people on recently. Diablo Cody, who wrote Juno and Young Adult, and Missy Suicide, one of the creators of Suicide Girls, and various others. But I had an episode with Mike Reese from The Simpsons, of course, one of the big writers of The Simpsons, and Maggie Roswell, who I was just talking about. It's actually probably one of, if not my favorite episode of the podcast, I do have to say, especially since it's the only one with two people on it, and we get into the geeky and nerdiness of Simpsons with Maggie and with Mike, and talk about the different characters representing, like, is comic book guy a geek? Is Lisa a nerd? Is Milhouse a dork? That's my contention, and we kind of talk about that and discuss it. So it's a lot of fun, and I have to say Maggie really steals the show on that episode. She's got some great things to say as far as nerd and geek culture and The Simpsons, how they're all connected. So I highly recommend nerdspodcast.com.
Yep. After you're done listening to this, go give that a listen. It's a super good conversation. But back to this episode, I do want to get back to when they bring in the talking Krusty doll for the first time. Abe Simpson has yet again another great line when he screams out, "That doll is evil, I tell you! Evil! Evil!" And Marge is like, "Grandpa, you've said that about all the toys," and he admits that he just wants attention. Right after that, we hear on the news, Kent Brockman announces that the air in Springfield is now only dangerous to kids and the elderly, which Homer is very excited about. And this is when Krusty comes to life for the first time. At first, he just says, I think it's, "I don't like you very much." And then it pretty quickly escalates to, "I'm going to kill you." And then we actually see the doll running around chasing after it.
What I found a little strange about that exchange is he says, "I'm going to kill you." And then Homer's like, he, I didn't even pull the string. And then he goes, "I'm going to kill you, Homer Simpson, you." And Homer just goes like, meh, and throws it away. If a talking doll said my name, I'd freak the fuck out. I'm just going to be honest with you. Like, I thought it was odd that Homer didn't care that it mentioned him by name.
Taking notes for this year's Halloween prank.
Well, I think at this point in Homer's life, especially considering the Halloween episodes themselves, he's probably getting pretty used to these things happening. So, he just wants to watch his TV. I mean, later in the episode,
it all comes down to him wanting to watch TV,
defending the house from zombies. I mean, Homer's pretty linked in with the TV there.
And the Halloween episodes do a good job of stretching the characteristics of the Simpsons to make things believable for the small little 5-minute segments.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the pull string, too, I love that he's going through his, I love that Krusty is doing his evil laugh, but the string runs out and he can't reach it himself, so he kind of, hints at Homer that he needs help, and Homer pulls the string so that Krusty can continue his maniacal laugh. Love that. I also really enjoy the scene we get in the bathtub next, where Homer is actually taking a bath, and I used to sing this song all the damn time. He's singing in the bathtub, "My baloney has a first name, it's Homer. My baloney has a second name, it's Homer." And I used to sing that to the point where I'm sure I drove people insane, because I just thought that was the funniest thing.
Yeah, that comes up again in another episode where it's the crossover with the critic when he's trying to say that he's feeling competitive with Jay Sherman, the critic, and he says, "Well, but does he know all the lyrics to the Oscar Mayer Wiener song?" And of course, Jay Sherman's outside marching around with the kids singing the song.
That's awesome! I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, you guys will get to it.
we're getting there eventually, exactly. We're probably do a small segue for a little bonus episode on the critic. Not every episode, but we'll just definitely have to tangent over and do a little discussion on the relevance of that to the Simpsons universe for sure.
Before he badmouthed MacGyver.
Right. I love this scene, too, where Krusty is attacking Homer in the bathtub, because Homer does what anyone would do, and he runs for his frickin' life, and he doesn't stop to grab a towel. And as he runs by Patty, Selma, and Marge at the table, I believe is it Patty is the lesbian, Patty. Or is it Selma?
My guidebook says Patty's the one that says it.
So Patty says, "There goes my last shred of heterosexuality."
Foreshadowing.
Exactly. Homer decides enough is enough, so he bags up the evil Krusty doll, and he puts it in a bag of his dirty socks, to which, at first, Krusty is like, "Oh, that's not gonna stop me. Oh, actually, I am getting a bit woozy." And the stench of Homer's feet does, in fact, knock the evil clown doll out. Long enough for him to dump down a bottomless pit, along with whatever is in those mobsters' bag, and a box full of Whoopi Goldberg news that the bottomless pit actually rejects. It throws it back out.
What's funny is, I don't know why, but I've been listening to, I know why I've been listening to it, but I've been listening to the David Cross, I don't want to call it an autobiography.
I love David Cross.
Yeah, he has this book.
Tobias for life, dude.
he has this book, This Is Why I Drink, that came out a few years ago, and I've been listening to the audiobook at the gym. I like to listen to audiobooks at the gym. Knocks off 2 birds with 1 stone. But
that gym shit will end after you get married. Don't worry.
It's really, really funny, by the way. I really enjoy reading comedians' books, and it's not the best book as far as story and whatnot. It's one of those books where it's a lot of lists and sketches and things, but it's by far one of the funniest ones I've ever listened to or read. But he just trashes Whoopi Goldberg through the whole book. And at first it was kind of funny, but now I'm kind of wondering, why Whoopi Goldberg? Did she do something to him?
She must have pissed some people off back then. Yeah.
He has this very strange obsession with...
He got that Star Trek roll over him.
Yeah, exactly. But
well, this was at a time too where if I remember right, Whoopi was popping up in everything. Yeah. She did the Sister Act movie. She was in that basketball dinosaur. What was it? Rex? T-Rex?
Oh yeah!
I don't know.
Oh my god! I forgot about that silly movie. That was back when
she was doing her thing back then. Yeah,
that was totally
she was making
era
moves.
Of the soccer mummy episode, the soccer mummy movies, where they did not care anymore. They're like, yeah, there's dinosaur, there's basketball. Who cares? Whoopi Goldberg.
There was a set of dice, and one of them had various creatures, and one of them had various sports. And then the other had some sort of magical spell style,
the Family Guy writing room,
or a yeah, exactly. It was the Family Guy writing room of the '90s, but it was always take some animal or creature, put them into the professional sports world, and hilarity will inevitably ensue.
Yeah, that makes me think of the Manatee Family Guy.
That's exactly
right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Record,
I didn't mean to go there, but it totally did. Finally, the family, Marge specifically, sees the doll actually trying to attack Homer. This entire time, they just thought he's been crazy. In fact, at one point, I love Bart says, "I think the pressure's finally getting to him." And then he's like, "Wait, what pressure?" But they actually see the doll attacking Homer, so Marge has the foresight to call the company that made the doll and let them know what's happening. And lo and behold, they send out a repairman, and it turns out that the problem the entire time was the switch on that doll was set to evil instead of good. And with a flick of a switch, all is resolved, and now instead of trying to kill Homer, Krusty the doll has essentially become Homer's servant, and he does it all just so he can go home at night to his plastic bride, Malibu Stacy, whose head falls off when he tries to kiss her.
I love when he's attacking Homer, and he's rolling around in the kitchen, and Homer's yelling, "The doll's trying to kill me, and the toaster's been laughing at me."
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I love that line. That's probably one of my favorite lines of the whole episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's never addressed again. That's all that's left at.
I want to hear about this laughing toaster.
Right?
Did you guys notice, like, throughout the episode, they keep the Krusty doll's size is continually changing? Like, he'll be able to bring Homer all that food and beer and whatnot, and then he can somehow also go into a Malibu Stacy dream house. Like, how big is he? I can't tell.
Maybe he's powered by the sun like Superman. So he gets weak when he's inside. I don't know.
The bullies do that a lot on this show. Jimbo, Kearney, Dolph, they all vary in size from episode to episode depending on how menacing they're supposed to be. The director's commentary has actually talked about that on a few episodes in the past, and it's very funny. Sometimes the size of things are very fluid throughout an episode, depending on the necessity of the scene. It's part of The Simpsons' charm.
I want to point out one thing from my guidebook, since it does different things for each story. The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family. It does say that the phone number that you're supposed to call for the Krusty Doll hotline is 1-900-DON'T-SUE. And there's actually an apostrophe in it, too.
Right on. We actually do cut back to the Simpsons' home real quick for the party segue, of course. Homer is royally screwing up, telling a scary story of his own. He's messed up all the details, and it's just not working. So Bart suggests that, "Grandpa, you've lived an interesting life. Why don't you tell a story?" Grandpa replies with, "That's a lie and you know it, but I have watched a lot of movies." So we get into King Homer, an obvious spoof of King Kong that starts out with Marge answering an ad in a newspaper to accept a mysterious journey on a ship. She goes and meets Smithers and Burns. Burns likes her, but when he asks Smithers for his opinion, Smithers says that semen and women don't mix.
I think women and semen don't mix. And then what does Burns? He says, "We know what you think."
So they're on their way to Ape Island. That's Marge, Smithers, Burns, a large crew, including people like Carl and Lenny. In fact, Carl, Lenny, and a third guy I didn't recognize are having a conversation from the crow's nest, talking about how we're on our way to Ape Island to get an ape. And then one of them says, "I wish we were on our way to Candy Apple Island." And they reply, "What's there?" Apes, just not as big."
And here we go again with another metaphor of Homer being a giant buffoon.
That reminds me of that episode where, what is it? They're going to go to like Monster Island or something like that, and it's like, don't worry, it's just a name. And they're still, and then the next shot is them being chased by monsters. And I thought you said it was just a name. Well, it's really more of a.
It's more of a peninsula or something like that.
That's right. Yeah.
Isn't that one in the future if something happens to Lisa? I think. Oh, that's gonna kill me now.
Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway.
They're set to head to the island, and Marge wonders if she'll be coming too. Burns assures her they wouldn't leave without the bait. The bathing beauty. Yeah, I did a good job covering that up.
Oh, I love Burns.
They're hiding in the bushes, but Marge's hair is clearly sticking out, and the natives in their foreign tongue actually identify her and say she'll make a great sacrifice. When Marge asks what they're saying, Burns assures her they're saying we wouldn't dream of sacrificing the blue-haired woman. Marge is reassured, but only momentarily, until the natives snatch her up and tie her to the sacrificing temple, I guess, the post, the poles that they tie her to offer her to Kong, essentially.
You know, I actually, again, because of my guidebook, I know what the tribal guys were actually saying. And I didn't know this because this is before my time. But the name they keep chanting, the Masi Tatapu, that was an NFL player. And he was Samoan, but he was a running back for USC in the early 70s. And he later went on to a career in the NFL with the Patriots. So that's what they were saying over and over again.
Oh, how fun. I had no idea. They hit the gong, which alerts Homer, King Homer, who's actually in the middle of a brawl with a dinosaur, that his sacrifice is ready. I love that the moment he gets distracted, the dinosaur actually bites him, and he goes,
which wasn't it a brontosaurus
before he runs off.
Meat eaters.
I didn't catch what series. I would actually need to call my 3-year-old nephew to tell me which dinosaur it is. He would know. He knows them all.
I don't recall.
I do not.
I thought it was a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
I thought it was T-Rex as well, but again, I wasn't gonna throw that out there.
Yeah.
And I think the point is it was a dinosaur with teeth that hurt Homer. Let's just leave it at that.
What I really liked is the shot when Homer first sees Marge when he comes, because I don't know if you guys have ever seen the original King Kong, but the way he looks down at her and has like this like gnarly grin on his face, it looks exactly shot for shot like the original movie when King Kong actually does that.
Yeah.
They do that a lot in The Simpsons, where they make like a shot-for-shot remake, and it's always really neat to see. I have seen the side-by-side comparison for this one specifically. I think my favorite is the one where Bart's reaching up for the cupcakes, and I want to say it's from Clockwork Orange. Yeah, Clockwork Orange.
Well, they also, in the same episode, same segment, when Homer reaches into Marge's apartment and pulls her out, it's the same. And even the animation, it kind of has a slow sort of claymation texture to it, and so they certainly were looking at it a lot.
I mean, in 1992, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no, I mean, Mike Reese has said in the past that he really feels that Simpsons was really one of the first shows ever, especially cartoons, to really kind of play with pop culture in this way. I mean, I know Looney Tunes and things like that would make references, but not really in the same kind of fashion that The Simpsons would, where it was make such direct reference to other TV shows and movies in more than just kind of a sort of playful, quick little moment of Bugs Bunny saying or doing something, but rather, like full, parodies in that way, where they were really making those kind of, meta references. So,
especially the making fun of your own network part, I always really enjoy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But, I love when Homer is climbing up, King Homer is climbing up the building, and the shot doesn't reveal that he's only, like half a foot up before he gets tired and falls. Maybe
2 stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love, that's such perfect Homer. Like that's such a perfect attribute to add to the Kong version of Homer. It's it implies so well, because when they first see the shot, it has the wide view of the skyscraper, and then you immediately see it's Burns and Marge in the room, so you kind of naturally assume it's the penthouse, and then lo and behold, when he looks up, there's still like a mile of building to go. Absolutely love that. I also love right before that, actually, when he actually escaped, when Burns was describing the show they were about to see. They, of course, have King Homer on display on the stage, and when asked what he's going to do, Burns replies, he's going to stand around for about 3 hours, and then we're going to end with the ethnic comedy styling of Dugan and Dershowitz. This is kind of a real-life play. Again, this is from the commentary, but this is actually kind of making fun of the fact that while King Kong is a great movie, really, there's not a lot that was happening on that show. I mean, the monkey was really just standing on a stage, and everybody was just marking out entirely.
Which you think they would learn not to take pictures, because they do this again when they capture the Loch Ness Monster, and they freak out Burns by taking too many pictures that time.
I love also the commentary how they bring up the very good point, both in this segment, but also in the original film, that it's like, what is the show supposed to be? You're just gawking at this gigantic ape. I mean, that's not really a show, you know? That's not, what are you actually supposed to be doing aside from just going, wow, that is definitely a big monkey.
Yeah, it takes like 2 minutes tops before you're like, all right, that is definitely the biggest monkey I've ever seen. Who wants
Are
to
you
get something
kidding
to
me?
eat?
If you saw that in real life, you're saying like after 2 minutes you've been like, I've seen bigger. Like that wouldn't freak you out.
If he was just standing there, then I would get pretty bored pretty quick, dude. It's 2017.
Yeah, I got
have a
stuff
smartphone.
to do, man. I'm a busy man.
Again, it's not that it's not impressive. It's just that you can only stare at something not. If it started doing tricks, I'd
run
hang
out
around
the door if
a bit
it started
longer.
doing tricks. That means it can learn.
You're forgetting something really important. This is very likely in New York or on Broadway or something like that. You know how expensive a ticket to something like that would be, especially back then. Without inflation, all that kind of stuff. Like, that would cost like a regular person probably the same amount as a car. So it's like, and I'm just going to look at this friggin' monkey for 5 minutes? Like, no, sir, no.
But if you don't know that beforehand, you're not going to go in there and then leave after 2 minutes if you paid that much to get in.
Then I would be really angry because now it's...
Then you might break the shackles around you and start storming around.
Yeah, at least that would have been something interesting. Then, and especially watching him eat Shirley Temple. I mean, come on now.
Yeah. As we all expected, being as this is a spoof of King Kong, King Homer does escape, as Matthew just mentioned, on his rampage. Oh, that's another great part. They actually mention the shackles holding him, and they're like, what's he gonna do, break out and run a rampage on the city? And that's exactly what happens in the very next shot. On his way to snatch up Marge, and as we talked about, barely make it up one story of the building before passing out, he does snatch up Shirley Temple, and I think he eats Barney's entire bag of peanuts as well, which Barney only offered him one. It then wraps up with Marge falling in love with King Homer in the very similar fashion to how she did in the real world of The Simpsons, if that's not a weird sentence to say. And I love that at the wedding scene, the little monkey shows up and they ask him, are you with the bride or the groom?
And then Homer eats Marge's father.
Oh, Homer. I actually took the time to watch the introduction to Love American Style, which is where that little kind of jingle at the end comes from that they use.
Oh, wow.
Soda Blanche and others. Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's actually it's some of the same people who did Happy Days, or it's where Happy Days originally came from, because what it was every episode I think was a different cast of characters, but would deal with love. But the one that I actually found, just the intro for, the first one that comes up, indeed it was Ron Howard, or Ronnie Howard as they said it, and some of the other people from Happy Days. So and the caption read something like, "This is the first Happy Days." And I don't know if they were kidding or not, and I didn't have a chance to look into it more, but I definitely highly recommend anyone just look up Love American Style. It is the most ridiculous introduction to a TV show, and it does have that song, da, 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 except they're serious.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
After King Homer ends, we go to our final setup at the Halloween party. This time, Marge comes out with fruit, saying she opted to get nature's candy instead of candy, which went over about as good as you would expect at an elementary school Halloween party. Just then, Ned Flanders shows up in an awesome costume where he looks like he's been decapitated. He says, "Oh, hope I didn't scarily air you." And then Grandpa actually is clutching his heart as if he's having a heart attack.
Then didn't Bart say something like, I've got a story that's going to make you wet your pants? And then Grandpa said, I already did.
It's too late.
Yeah, too late. Again, another great Grandpa line.
Grandpa was the MVP of the episode, I think. He had some of the greatest lines for sure. And Bart's story starts off, it's Dial Z for Zombie.
Yeah.
Another Hitchcock reference. This one starts out with Bart doing his school book report. He chose the book Baby's First Pop-Up Book, which Edna Krabappel wasn't a huge fan of. She says, "Bart, did you actually read a book for preschoolers?" To which Bart replies,
"Well, most of it."
Of course, that's not going to fly, so Bart is told he'll need to do another book report, which brings us to the school library. he decides he'll do this report on Where's Waldo, and boy, is that guy not even trying anymore. He's just right in the middle of the page. And that's when Bart, for the first time ever, notices that his school has an occult book section. So he decides he'll give it a look.
Perfect for every elementary school.
Books literally start throwing themselves at Bart, including the Book of Magic Spells Part 2. And I do want to note that magic was spelled with a K, for those of you that care. There is significance to that. People believe that the magic with the K has a lot to do with a guy by the name of Alastor Moody, who has a large following for being, I don't want to say Satanist, because I feel like that's not the right word, and that has a weighted meaning to it, but just look it up if you're interested. It's fascinating stuff that I don't believe in, but like to read about.
It's actually Aleister Crowley, and
Crowley, yeah, thank you. I just totally said a Harry Potter character.
Yeah.
I was so confused.
Aleister Moody is Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, it is Satanism, but the Satanists believe a kind of different version of Satanism than what the Christians believe. In fact, the character whose name I'm blanking on right now, on Silicon Valley, who's a Satanist.
Yes,
yeah,
Guilfoyle.
Yeah. So that comes up there.
I love that show.
What's really funny about all this is, a little bit of what we Jews would call beshert, as far as a little bit of fate. Usually it's love based, but still, right now is David Cross actually in the audiobook. Just the last time I was listening to it, he talks about the difference between magic, M-A-G-I-C, and M-A-G-I-K. I was familiar with it from before anyway, because if you actually read, do you remember the West Memphis 3?
Yes, I'm very interested. I've read all the Devil's Knot, and I know all about Damien Eccles.
Yeah, magic, M-A-G-I-K. And so, for them, it's more like kind of what quote unquote real witches believe, which is more about sort of nature and a connectivity to the earth and to a certain kind of universalism than sort of,
It has nothing to do with the Christian devil.
Exactly.
It's a completely different belief system.
It is a different kind of belief system. And again, and the only reason I know so much about this stuff, and not that much, but more than maybe the next person possibly, is just from reading Damien Eccles books, and I literally was just listening to David Cross talking about it. And Aleister Crowley was also very big with a lot of early Hollywood people, a guy named Kenneth Anger and a guy named Harry Smith, a few different very eccentric filmmakers who are very, very fascinating characters. And Harry Smith actually made some of the first animated art films ever, like back in the 40s and 50s. A lot of stuff, the kind of stuff that Terry Gilliam would kind of sort of copy later on. And so these people were all into Aleister Crowley, sort of. He was almost more like kind of a mystical figure for artists in a lot of ways, back then. But anyway.
Man, I'm the same boat. Was fascinated with the Paradise Lost documentaries. Got really into reading up on the case and read Eccles' book as well. It's been just so long since I've read them, which is why I totally botched on the name Crowley. But yeah, very interesting to read about. Again, not something that I give a lot of merit to personally, but I think it's fascinating to read about.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't know too much about the tenets or anything like that, so. But I do know it's kind of all I really know is it's different than what kind of the conventional what Satanism is considered. So look, everyone's got their beliefs and their thoughts, and it's always just interesting to get little pieces here or there where you can. And all of a sudden I'm realizing, why are we talking about Satanism and Aleister Crowley?
This has been a weird podcast, man, but it's been a fun conversation. So who cares? It goes places. It's great, man. We enjoy chasing you down the rabbit hole. It's a lot of fun. I think I actually caused this one, so it's not entirely you. It's all good. But we were talking about magic because that was the book that Bart actually attacked him in the library. And I love, there's actually like evil faces saying evil, evil. And when Bart slams the book, they actually go, ow. I don't know why that made me giggle so much, but it sure did.
Yeah, that's good.
Bart's reading the book in Lisa's room, and he gets to the segment on zombies, which kind of upsets Lisa a little bit, because after all, it's only been 4 years since Snowball 1 died. On this very day, mind you.
Oh my gosh.
Bart looks it up. He decides that he's going to figure out how to raise the dead, or specifically Snowball 1. But sure enough, he fucks it up and he ends up raising a whole horde of zombies. I love that when they're actually out at the graveyard doing their incantation, Bart is wearing a Michael Jackson Thriller album on his head, and that absolutely kills me. The spell, he says, is actually just the last names of a bunch of game show hosts. I think the last one was actually Trebek.
Yes. Yeah, every little incantation he does, it's all a theme. Everything he says is a theme for that one little moment.
I know the last one was condoms, and the first one was game show host. I don't think I caught the other two.
The second set is stores, and then the third set was...
I did catch stores.
1970s TV investigators.
Oh, I definitely did not catch that one.
Well, they could book him, Dano.
Oh, okay, right on. Immediately in Willy fashion, the zombie outbreak ruins the hard work he just did, because he just finished leveling out a grave, and right then a zombie burst through it, so he has to start over again. I thought that was really funny.
One of the zombies that climbs out of the grave was, what was his name, Jay Kogan? And that was actually one of the writer-producers on the show.
Yeah,
cool.
They spelled his name wrong.
Is it Coogan?
No, it's either, I believe his name is spelled Kogan, but on the grave it says Kogen. Whichever it is, it's spelled wrong.
Yeah, you know what? My book actually says that. Yeah, it has his name in quotes as A-N, but it says the grave is E-N.
Yeah.
I just didn't read far enough.
Yeah, he was one of the first, and then the other one, too, is Wally Wolodarski. It says Wolodarski on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, notice, so both the graves have early Simpsons writers on there. And Wally Wolodarski actually was also close with Wes Anderson. In fact, I think he
cool.
pops up in Rushmore, or there's a character named Wolodarski.
I thought Bill Murray yells at Wolodarski or something like that happens in one of the movies.
Yeah, I think Wes Anderson actually thanks him in most of his films too. I'm actually not as familiar with Wes Anderson's work. I kind of one of those people who dropped off after the first couple, but I know that he and Wolodarski are friendly. But yeah, if you look, one grave says Jay Kogan and the other one says Wolodarski, and it's Wally Wolodarski, who was also a writer for The Simpsons.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Only 148 more to mention.
There you go.
The zombie horde goes to the Flanders home next, and of course Flanders just lets them in.
Before you do that, here's my continuity of the day right here.
All right.
The Simpsons kids are running home. You see in the shots, they run from the right side of the screen to the left side of the screen, clearly passing Flanders' house. Now, any good Simpsons fan knows the Simpsons actually live to the right of the Flanders, so why were they running past their own home if they were running home?
Maybe they had to do a strategic flank around to the backyard to avoid the zombies.
Come on, guys, you know the answer to that. Anytime something like that happens, a wizard did it.
Exactly.
Magical Maggie.
A wizard named Maggie, yes. The zombies do arrive at the Flanders home, and of course the Flanders just let them right in Flanders style. And next we see the kids telling their dad, Homer, on the couch, so we have something to tell you, Homer. Did you wreck the car? No. Did you raise the dead? Yes. But the car's okay? Yes.
Love that line.
Okay, then. I love that those are the two things he goes through. That's just so fucking classic Homer. Just like, is the car okay? After knowing that they did, in fact, raise a zombie horde.
But it's pretty smart because he knows he's going to need the car to escape.
They are going to need that later. That's part of this episode.
It's a zombie apocalypse master. He knows when to sacrifice himself. Like, he's got it down.
Or try to sacrifice himself. We'll get there in a second. This outbreak is spreading at school now. Skinner is clearly a zombie. He actually announces that he wants Martin to come to the office and to bring that big brain of his. Krusty is still doing his show until he gets eaten by zombie Mel, and then he becomes zombie Krusty and tells all of their kids to send their parents' brains into the show. I love it's in like the kind of like back in the day talking about Mark Summers on like a show like What Would You Do, whenever you'd have like the segments where you'd be allowed to like write into the show. Very similar concept for Krusty the Clown.
Yeah, that was funny that you could either send brains or write parents' brains on a 3x5 card and mail it in.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, for sure.
Right after that, you see all of the Simpsons frantically boarding up the house. Well, all of the Simpsons except for Homer, who's still watching TV. When Marge says, Homer, did you barricade the door? Homer's like, why? Oh yeah, the zombies! Just as they burst through the door. As Richie mentioned, Homer does try to sacrifice himself, but unfortunately, when he throws himself at the zombies to protect his family, the zombies can't find any brains, so they toss him aside and move on. I love they actually do a finger tap with the classic hollow tap 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 sound on Homer's skull. Brains. Bart is talking to Marge and Lisa, saying how he thought that dabbling in the dark arts would be a good time. It'd be good for a chuckle. He should have never opened that book, which gives Lisa the idea that maybe another book would help them solve this problem. So they're off to the library, or as Homer says, to the book depository. On their way to the car, the zombie outbreak is everywhere, and Homer actually ends up having a shotgun, and he blasts Flanders away. The kids yell out, "You killed the zombie Flanders!" And Homer's classic reply, probably the best line in the entire episode, "He was a zombie?" They did note on the commentary that was a Mike Reese line, and man, did that one slay.
Yeah, Mike. I'm friendly with Mike. As you know, we just talked about from that podcast episode I did, and I've interviewed him and other things as well. He said someone recently actually came up to him and quoted that line at him, and that made him feel really proud that someone actually remembered one of his lines. And I actually asked him, and he thinks it's possible, but there's actually a similar line. That's almost the exact same joke in a later Treehouse of Horror episode where Grandpa runs in. It's the one where Bart turns into a vampire. It's sort of Lost Boys, and Grandpa runs in with a hammer and a stake and goes, "We have to kill the boy." And they go, "Grandpa, how do you know that he's a vampire?" And he goes, "Bart's a vampire," and runs away.
Hey, it's a joke so nice you gotta use it twice. I think it's funny in both spots. But yeah, definitely one of the best lines in this episode. On the way to the library, we get a quick cameo from none other than Krang and Kodos, who just stop in to see the zombie apocalypse take over.
Krang? This isn't the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
You always Ninja Turtle it up.
I do.
It's Kang and Kudos.
I did totally just Ninja Turtle it up. I gotta get the Ninja Turtles in on every episode. Fuck you guys. I do it some way, somehow.
This episode really got out there.
We hit a lot of pockets of pop culture. On
podcast for
everyone. All over the place.
Satanism.
And a hot plate.
At the school, the Simpsons run into Barney, who is chewing on an arm. But don't worry, he's not a zombie, but when in Rome. Then we see Homer blast away Washington, Einstein, and William Shakespeare.
Is this the end of zombie Shakespeare?
They are able to get to the book. Bart calls out 4 condom companies, and all is restored in Springfield. Actually, first he said the 70s detectives, and he turned Lisa into a snail, I believe.
What I liked is the zombies walking back to their graves, and one's like, "See you in hell," and the other one's like, "Still pushing that rock?"
They're so polite to each other, it's great. And then there's a scene with John Smith getting into his grave. Another John Smith comes up and is like, "Excuse me, I'm John Smith. Are you John Smith, 1882? Oh, no, my mistake." They're just so very cordial, it's hilarious. And finally, the main message of this entire episode, and often this series, we see that the zombie problem has been solved. Marge, I think, even says, "I'm glad we're not zombies." And then they all sit in front of the TV and stare blankly. Homer at one point kind of brails out, "Man, fall. Funny." And all of the other Simpsons just kind of in agreement. And we fade to black. Matthew, is there anything else that you wanted to add about Treehouse of Horror 3?
I think that just about does it.
You think an hour and a half is enough coverage for a 22-minute show?
Obviously, I wish, I could go on and on and on about one of my favorite horror films and even favorite films of all time, Night of the Living Dead, but my lovely and very tired wife, Becky, has been giving me the eye for the last 15 minutes or so. I will just throw it out there. I love Night of the Living Dead, obviously, that last segment, something we didn't really talk about, but clearly they're parodying that through much of that episode. And
anytime you do zombies, I think it's homage in some way to Night of the Living Dead.
You can't do camera angles and everything else, but I love that they did that, and so that was something kind of fun. This is I think it's one of the really good Treehouse of Horror episodes. Lots of very memorable lines, as you said. The line about shooting Flanders. I'm going to agree with Richie. I love that line. It's really smart, but the line that always makes me laugh so hard is just Marge, the doll's trying to kill me and the toaster's been laughing at me. It doesn't get much better than that. I used to record things from the TV and movies on a little tape recorder, and then I would connect it to my big old compact computer and save it so that I would have all these sounds on my computer, like when it would start and things like that, back before internet and and you could just get whatever you want and actually change the settings like that. And one of the ones was that line. I recorded it from The Simpsons. And, you even had Homer going, I'll always remember that line. So that's what I got to say about that.
Very cool. Richie, anything from you or that book of yours before we get out of here?
I'm just going to back up what you were just saying, Matt. This is our third Treehouse of Horror, and it's by far my favorite up to this point so far. I enjoy the other two, but I don't enjoy them as much as Miles does, just because I think these stories are a little more fun, and we're getting into, again, we talk about it, we're finally hitting the golden age of The Simpsons. And when I was a kid, I always ran around talking about the time that Homer shot zombie Ned Flanders and said he was a zombie. Like, about the third or fourth time I saw this episode, everyone at school had seen it multiple times, and we could always laugh about it. So I really enjoyed this one a lot.
I agree. Best Halloween special from The Simpsons so far, and I think we've talked enough about it. So, Matthew, one more time, let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me at MathewKlickstein.com, MathewKlickstein.com, and you can see all my shenanigans, both online and otherwise. Please do also look out for the Marc Summers documentary coming in the fall on Your Marc, M-A-R-C, and you can find out more about that at marcsummersmovie.com. We got plenty of stuff happening, and I also, if I may, especially for people listening to this podcast, especially if you got this far in it, we have a great animation guy who actually Maggie Roswell works with, Maggie and her husband Hal, out in Boulder where Maggie and Hal live now, and Patrick, the animation guy I'm talking about, makes really fun little cartoons with Marc Summers' head and does all these different kind of promotional things. Cool. Yeah, we're actually going to have an interactive one coming out very soon where you'll be able to shoot slime at Marc and a few other familiar faces. It'll actually be kind of based on the Alamo idea. So we're going to have some fun with that. So it's one movie website people should definitely be checking out and fairly regularly, because we actually have a lot of stuff that we're always putting up, little short films and outtakes from the film and interviews with people like Phil Moore from Nick Arcade and others who we've talked to, and some of these little cartoons. So I highly recommend it. Be on the lookout for the Simpsons book I'll be coming out with in the fall 2018. And I guess check out the Nerds podcast, nertzpodcast.com. And hopefully you'll hear me again on this podcast at some point in the near future as well.
Definitely. Can't wait to have you back on again. And hey, while you're waiting for On Your Marc to come out in October, go ahead and pick up his book Slime, the oral history of the golden age of Nickelodeon. If you're into The Simpsons like we are, I know you're going to be into Nickelodeon like we are as well, and that book is the jam. So check that out in the meantime. Richie, very quickly, where can they find you online?
You guys can always follow me on Twitter. I'm at theWiz_kid23. And while you're on there, go ahead and give our show a follow as well. That's at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY.
And I, of course, am at MrMostDaysOff on both Twitter and Instagram. And look out for the return of Lucha of the Hidden Temple coming up very soon on VoicesOfWrestling.com. That is, of course, with Dr. Nove, Chris Novabrino. And other than that, we look forward to being back with you next week for a very special episode. It is going to be Itchy and Scratchy the Movie.
Quit eating so many people, eat more vegetables.
And until next time, be cromulent to each other.